Thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more from me, I have a lot of classes on Udemy. You can find the links to a lot of those in the description. Hey guys, so what I thought I'd do today is we're going to go through the first chapter of this, and I'm going to drop some little hints and tidbits and whatnot. So if you have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns, issues about the testimony of the Mad Arab Part 1 that we're going to be going through right now, then put them in the comments and whatnot, and let me know if you like this idea. So if you have one of these, then open it up and maybe grab a pen, pause me if there's anything that I say you might want to write down, and let's see. All right, so here we go. Story time. This is the testimony of all that I have seen and all that I have learned in those years that I have passed the 3 seals of Mashu. I have seen 1001 moons. That's roughly 85 years, by the way. I did the math. And surely this is enough for the span of a man's life, though it is said the prophets lived much longer. I am weak and ill and bear a great tiredness and exhaustion. From what? And a sigh hangs in my breast like a dark lantern. I am old. The wolves carry my name in their midnight speeches, and that quiet, subtle voice is summoning me from afar, and a voice much closer will shout it into my ear with unholy patience. The weight of my soul will decide its final resting place. Before that time, I must put down here all that I can concerning the horrors that stalk without, and which lie in wait at the door of every man, for this is the ancient arcana that has been handed down of old, but which has been forgotten by all but a few men, the worshippers of the ancient ones. May their names be blotted out. Wonder why he said that. Alright, hopefully my cat doesn't interrupt this because she's over here. And if I do not finish this task, take what is here and discover the rest, for time is short and mankind does not know nor understand the evil that awaits it. That means this book is incomplete. Which does kind of give a little credence to the fragments of Nurgak and the black magic of primary forces, by the way. But, then you get into the whole debate about whether or not something is legit or not. It's almost like the non-canonical books of, like, the Bible and the apocryphal stuff. You'll have people that argue about whether or not it's legit or not, Let's see. That awaits it from every side, from every gate, and from every broken barrier, from every mindless acolyte at the altars of madness. For this is the book of the dead, the book of the black earth, that I have writ down in the peril of my life, exactly as I received it on the plains of the Igigi. Now the plains of the Igigi is like far off. We're talking, I think it's like the Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Ur of the Kabbalah, right? The cruel celestial spirits from beyond the wanderers of the wastes. Let all who read this book be warned thereby that the habitation of men are seen and surveyed by the ancient race of gods and demons for a time before time, and that they seek revenge for that forgotten battle that took place somewhere in the cosmos and rent the worlds in the days before the creation of man, when the elder gods walked the spaces, the race of Marduk, and as he is known to the Chaldeans, and of Enki our master, the lord of magicians. Know then that I have trod all the zones of the gods, and also the places of the Azonai, and have descended unto the foul places of death and eternal thirst, which may be reached through the gate of Ganzir, which was built in Ur in the days before Babylon was. Know too that I have spoken with all manner of spirit and daemon, whose names are no longer known in the societies of man, or were ever known, and the seals of some of these are writ herein, yet others I must take with me when I leave you. So that means, once again, it's incomplete, which is why you don't find the sign of Zedak in here, but he does mention it. Anu, have mercy on my soul. I have seen the unknown lands that no map has ever charted. I have lived in the deserts and the wastelands, and spoken with demons and the souls of slaughtered men and of women who have died in childbirth, victims of the she-fiend Lamashta. I have traveled beneath the seas in search of the palace of our master, and found and by the way, now who is that? So you could reference that it's Enki, because he did just say Enki our master a couple paragraphs before that. Some Cthulhu people, or Lovecraftian people will say it's Cthulhu, but you're also talking about the ocean here. So what you could be talking about is Tiamat, because the Ancient Ones aren't really that bad. Get it? Let's see. And found the stone of monuments of vanquished civilizations and deciphered the writings of some of these, while still others remain mysteries to any man who lives. And these civilizations were destroyed because of the knowledge contained in this book. I have traveled among the stars and trembled before the gods. I have at last found the formula by which I passed the gate Arzir, which is littered through this book, by the way, and passed into the forbidden realms of the foul Igigi. The text of the Necronomicon was learned in the realms of the Igigi through the gate of Arzir. Sorry, that was my little note in there. I have raised demons and the dead. I have summoned the ghosts of my ancestors to real and visible appearance on the tops of temples. That's a hint about working with the Ancient Ones. To reach the stars, and built to touch the nethermost cavities of Hades. I have wrestled with the black magician Azog-Thoth in vain, and fled to the earth by calling upon Inanna and her brother Marduk, lord of the double-headed axe. I have raised armies against the lands of the east by summoning the hordes of fiends I have made subject unto me, and so doing found Naga, which, by the way, is the name of the Siberian god of death, interestingly. The god of the heathens, who breathes flame and roars like 1,000 thunders. I have found fear. I have found the gate that leads to the outside, by which the ancient ones who ever seek the entrance to our world keep eternal watch. I have smelled the vapors of that ancient one, queen of the outside, whose name is writ in the terrible Magan text, the testament of some dead civilization, whose priests seeking power swing open the dread evil gate for an hour past the time, and were consumed. I come to possess this knowledge through circumstances quite peculiar, while still the unlettered son of a shepherd in what is called Mesopotamia by the Greeks. When I was a youth traveling alone in the mountains to the east called Mashu, which, is the twin mountains that Shamash goes into the underworld through. It's referenced in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It has to do with initiation and yada yada yada. I made a video on that. I think it was one of my last uploads. Let's see. By the people who lived there, I came upon a gray rock carved with 3 strange symbols. It stood as high as a man and as wide around as a bull. It was firmly in the ground, and I could not move it. Thinking no more of the carvings, save that they might be the work of a king to mark some ancient victory over an enemy, I built a fire at its foot to protect me from the wolves that wander in those regions, and went to sleep, for it was night, and I was far from my village, being Bet Darabia, which means the house where life dwells, by the way. Being about 3 hours from dawn, in the 19th day of Shabbatu, 19. And by the way, Shabbatu's Aquarius, so we kind of know what time of year it is. As the sphere of Libat rose in the heavens, which means when you have Venus as the rising star, I was awakened by the howl of a dog, perhaps a wolf, uncommonly loud and close at hand. The fire had died to its embers, and these red glowing coals cast a faint dancing shadow across the stone monument with the 3 carvings. I began to make haste to build another fire, when at once the great rock began to rise slowly in the air, as though it were a dove. That's a reference to, the Holy Spirit, and a reference to Inanna, by the way. I could not move or speak for the fear that seized upon my spine and wrapped cold fingers around my skull. The Deek of Azug-Bel-Ya, which I never figured out what that meant, was no stranger to me than this sight, though the former seemed to melt in my hands. Presently I heard a voice, softly some distance away, and a more practical fear, that of the possibility of robbers, took hold of me, and I rolled behind some weeds, trembling. Another voice joined the first, and soon several men in the black robes of thieves came together over the place where I was, surrounding the floating rock, of which they did not exhibit the least fright. I could see clearly now that the 3 carvings on the stone monument were glowing a flame-red color, as though the rock were on fire. The figures were murmuring together in prayer or invocation, of which only a few words could be heard, and these in some unknown tongue. Though, Anu, have mercy on my soul, these rituals are not unknown to me any longer. So basically, oh crap, I shouldn't know this stuff, but I do, so forgive me. The figures whose faces I could not see or recognize began to make wild passes in the air with the knives that glinted cold and sharp in the mountain night. From beneath the floating rock, out of the very ground where it had sat, came rising the tail of a serpent. A snake. This serpent was surely larger than any I had ever seen. The thinnest section thereof was fully that of the arms of 2 men, and it rose from the earth. As it rose from the earth, it was followed by another, although the end of the first was not seen, as it seemed to reach down in the very pit itself. These were followed by still more, and the ground began to tremble under the pressure of so many of these enormous arms. The chanting of the priests, for I knew them now to be the serpents of some hidden power, became much louder and very nearly hysterical. Ia ia, zia azag, ia ia, zia azkak, ia ia, kutulu zikur, ia. The ground where I was hiding became wet with some substance, being slightly downhill from the scene I was witnessing. I touched the wetness and found it to be blood. In horror, I screamed and gave my presence away to the priests. They turned toward me, and I saw a loathing that they had cut their chests with the daggers they had used to raise the stone. So that's interesting that he just said that. They cut their chests with the daggers they had used to raise the stone. At first, he mentioned that the stone rose up on its own, and now he's attributing the fact that the stone is rising up or floating due to the knives that they use. So that's reference to energy work with an alchemy, things like that. And then let's see. For some mystical purpose I cannot then divine, although I know now that blood is the very food of these spirits, which is why, and that's a hint about offerings, which is why the field after the battles of war glows with an unnatural light, the manifestations of the spirits feeding thereon. So we're talking about blood, we're talking about that's coming from Kingu, and Kingu is, kind of the id of ourselves, the kind of negative and more animalistic side that comes from the Ancient Ones because we have their blood in us, according to the, Simon Necronomicon stuff. May Anu protect us all. My scream had the effect of casting their ritual into chaos and disorder. I raced through the mountain path by which I had come, and the priest came running after me, although some seemed to stay behind, perhaps to finish the rites. However, as I ran wildly down the slopes in the cold night, my heart giving rise in my chest, and my head growing hot, the sound of splitting rocks and thunder came from behind and shook the very ground I ran upon. In fright and in haste, I fell to the earth. So there was a loud crack of thunder. Rising, I turned to face whatever attacker had come nearest me, though I was unarmed. To my surprise, what I saw was no priest of ancient horror, no necromancer of that forbidden art, but black robes fallen upon the grass and weeds, with no seeming presence of life or bodies beneath them. I walked cautiously to the first, and picking up a long twig, lifted the robe from the tangle of weeds and thorns. All that remained of the priest was a pool of slime, like green oil, and the smell of a body lain long to rot in the sun, so like instant death. Such a stench nearly overpowered me, but I was resolute to find the others and see if the same fortune had also befallen them. Walking back up the slope that I had so fearfully run down only moments ago, I came across yet another of the dark priests, in identical condition to the first. I kept walking, passing more of the robes as I went, not venturing to overturn them any longer. Then I finally came upon the gray stone monument that had risen unnaturally into the air at the command of the priests, and now upon the ground once more, probably because they weren't there with their athames raising it. Let's see. But the carvings still glowed with the supernatural light. The serpents, or what I had then thought of as serpents, had disappeared, but in the dead embers of the fire, now cold and black, was a shining metal plate. I picked it up and saw that it was also carved as the stone, but very intricately, after a fashion I could not understand. It did not bear the same markings of the stone, but I had the feeling I could almost read the characters, but could not, as though I once knew the tongue but had since long forgotten. My head began to ache as though the devil was pounding on my skull. That's a reference to one of the 7 Apkallu demons. When a shaft of moonlight struck the metal amulet, for I know now what it was, and a voice entered into my head and told me the secrets of the scene I had witnessed. In one word, Cthulhu, which means the man from the land of the dead. Alright, let's get that straight. So that means something in the underworld is calling to him. In that moment, as though whispered fiercely in my ear, I understood. These are the signs carved upon the gray stone. That was the gate to the outside. That's your hint about Arzir right there. And this is the amulet that I held in my hands and hold to this very day around my neck as I write these words. So this is the amulet of Ur that he's talking about. You can see the graphic on the page if you're reading it. Of the three carved symbols, the first is the sign of our race from beyond the stars, and it is called Ara in the tongue of the scribe who taught it to me. And an emissary of the elder ones in the tongue of the eldest city of Babylon was Ur. It is the sigil of the covenant of the elder gods, and when they see it, they who gave it to us, they will not forget us, they have sworn. So, let's see. Spirit of the skies, remember. So we just talked about the Ara, which looks like your standard, 5-pointed star. Spirit of the skies, remember. The second is the elder sign, and this is the key whereby the powers of the elder gods may be summoned. When used with the proper words and shapes, it has a name, and it is called Aga. So that's the elder sign. The third sign is the sign of the Watcher. It's called Bandar. The Watcher is a race sent by the elder ones. It keeps vigil while one sleeps, provided the appropriate ritual and sacrifice has been performed. Else, if called, it will turn upon you. So you can equate the Ara, Aga, and Bandar to 3 levels of consciousness, or the ego, the super ego, and the id. Let's see. These seals, to be effective, must be graven on stone and set in the ground. Just want to make sure I didn't skip a part. Or set upon the altar of offerings, or carried to the rock of invocations, or engraved on the metal of one's god or goddess and hung about the neck, but hidden from the view of the profane. Of these 3, the Ara and the Aga may be used separately, that is to say, singly and alone. The Bandar, however, must never be used alone, but with one or both of the others, for the Watcher must needs be reminded of the covenant it is sworn with the elder gods in our race. It will turn upon thee and slay thee, and ravage thy town until succor is to be had from the elder gods by the tears of thy people and the wailing of thy women. Let's see. Kakamu, which translates to, and it is so. It's almost like amen. Something like that. The metal amulet that I have retrieved from the ashes of the fire, and which caught the light of the moon, is a potent seal against whatever may come in the gate from the outside. For seeing it, they will retreat from thee. So, basically, the amulet of Ur scares away stuff from the, quote, outside. And whether you look at that at like an energetic or spiritual or a psychological model or level of looking at things, we're talking about stuff that gets rid of unwanted and negative jazz. Let's see. Save only if it catch the light of the moon upon its surface, which means don't let it be hit by sunlight, otherwise you got to reconsecrate it and whatnot. For in the dark days of the moon, which means while the moon is new, or in the clouds, there can be little protection against the fiends of the ancient lands, should they break the barrier, or be let in by their servants upon the face of the earth. In such case, no recourse is to be had until the light of the moon shines upon the earth, for the moon is the eldest among the Zonai, and the starry symbol of our pact. Nana, father of the gods, remember. Wherefore the amulet must be engraved upon pure silver in the full light of the moon, that the moon shine upon it at its working, and the essence of the moon incantations must be performed, and the prescribed rituals as given forth in this book. And the amulet must never be exposed to the light of the sun, for Shamash, called Udu, in his jealousy will rob the seal of its power. In such case, it must be bathed in water of camphor, and the incantations and ritual, which it never really specifies, by the way, be performed once again. But verily it will be better to engrave another. So, in other words, it's better to start from scratch if one gets tainted by the sun. These secrets I have given to thee at the pain of my life, never to be revealed to the profane or the banished or the worshippers of the ancient serpent, but to keep within thine own heart, always silent upon these things. Which means, don't talk about it with anybody. Oops. I built a whole channel on that. Peace be to thee. Henceforth, from the fateful night in the mountains of Mashu, I wandered about the countryside in search of the key of the secret knowledge that had been given to me. And it was a painful and lonely journey, during which time I took no wife, called no house or village my home, and dwelt in various countries, often in caves or in the deserts, learning several tongues, as a traveler might learn them, to bargain with the tradespeople and learn of their news and customs. but by bargaining was with the powers that reside in each of these countries, and soon I came to understand many things which before I had no knowledge, except perhaps in dreams. The friends of my youth deserted me, and I them. When I was 7 years gone from my family, I learned that they had all died of their own hand. Ouchies. They all self-deleted. For reasons no one was able to tell me, their flocks had been slain as the victims of some strange epidemic. I wandered as a beggar, being fed from the town as the local people saw fit, often being stoned and threatened with imprisonment. On occasion I was able to convince some learned man that I was a sincere scholar and was thereby permitted to read the ancient records in which the details of necromancy, sorcery, magic, and alchemy are given. I learned of the spells that cause men illness, the plague, blindness, insanity, and even death. I learned the various classes of demons and evil gods that exist, and of the old legends concerning the ancient ones. I was thus able to arm myself against also the she devil Lamashta, who was called the sword that splits the skull, the sight of whom causeth horror and dismay, and some say death of a most uncommon nature. In time, I learned of the names and properties of all the demons, devils, fiends, and monsters listed herein, in this book of the Black Earth. I learned the power of the astral gods and how to summon their aid in times of need. I learned, too, of the frightful beings who dwell beyond the astral spirits, who guard the entrance to the Temple of the Lost, of the Ancient of Days, of the Ancient of the Ancient Ones, whose name I cannot write here. Because you gotta figure it out. In my solitary ceremonies in the hills, worshipping with fire and sword, with water and dagger, and with the assistance of a strange grass, which they call it azala, and I'm thinking that's bud, if you know what I mean, that grows wild in certain parts of Mashu, which means the mountains. So did that actually grow up there? Because Mashu is supposed to be like cedar mountains. But anyway, and with which I had unwittingly built my fire before the rock, which means he built the fire out of bud, right? The grass that gives the mind great power to travel tremendous distances into the heavens and also into the hells. I received the formulae for the amulets and talismans which follow, which provide the priest with safe passage among the spheres wherein he may travel in search of wisdom. Okay, cool. From this description, it's safe to say that the spiritual awakening the Mad Arab had that night in the mountains can be attributed to unintentional ingestion of bud smoke. Be careful what you make a fire with, right? A side note, I know somebody that they went to make a fire and they did it with poison ivy. That's pretty smart. Anyway, carrying on. By now, after 1001 moons of the journey, the Maskim nip at my heels and the Rabushu pulls at my hair, Lamashta opens her dread jaws, Azagthoth gloats blindly at his throne, Cthulhu raises his head and stares up through the veils of sunken Varlorni, up through the abyss, and fixes his stare upon me. Wherefore I must with haste write this book, lest my end come sooner than I had prepared. For indeed it appears as though I have failed in some regard as to the order of the rites, or to the formula, or to the sacrifices. For now it appears as if the entire host of Ereshkigal lies waiting, dreaming, drooling for my departure. So basically what that means is this book, he made errors in it. So that's why he's going to meet the fate that he is. So what it's saying is, hey, I gave you all the information, but I screwed something up in here. So you got to figure out what's wrong and fix it, because otherwise it's not going to work, and you are going to anger the spirits, and then they're going to come after you. Where the heck was I? Should have used the little bookmark thing. For indeed it appears that I have failed in some regard as to the order of the rites, or to the formulae, or to the sacrifices, for now it appears as if the entire host of Ereshkigal lies waiting, dreaming, drooling for my departure. I pray the gods that I am saved, and not perish as did the priest Abdul ben Martu in Jerusalem. The gods remember and have mercy upon him. My fate is no longer writ in the stars. By the way, I'm trying to remember who Abdul ben Martu is. But Abdul of Martu. Maybe I'll look that one back up. I thought I knew it at one point. Anyways, the gods remember and have mercy upon him. My fate is no longer writ in the stars, for I have broken the Chaldean covenant by seeking power over the Zonai. So that's one of your first troubles there. First he says, I screwed up and they're coming after me. Could it be the formulas? And then he's like, oh wait, they're coming after me because I sought power over the gods. Don't do that. Work with them. I have set foot on the moon, and the moon no longer has power over me. The lines of my life have been obliterated by my wanderings in the wastes over the letters writ in the heavens by the gods, and even now I can hear the wolves howling in the mountains as they did that fateful night, and they are calling my name and the names of others. That means he's not the only one doing this stuff. I fear for my flesh, but I feel fear for my spirit more. Remember always in the empty moment to call upon the gods not to forget thee, for they are forgetful and very far away. Light thy fires high in the hills and on the tops of temples and pyramids, that they may see and remember. Remember always to copy each of the formulae as I have put down, and not to change it by one line or dot, not so much as a hair's breadth, lest it be rendered valueless, or worse, a broken line provides means of entrance for the outside, for a broken star is the gate of Ganzir. That's a hint. The gate of death, the gate of the shadows, and the shells. Recite the incantations as they are written here in the manner that this prescribed. Prepare the rituals without erring, and the proper places and times render the sacrifices. May the gods be ever merciful unto thee. May thou escape the jaws of the Maskim and vanquish the power of the Ancient Ones. And the gods grant thee death before the Ancient Ones rule the earth once more. Kakamu, which means, and so it is. And Selah, which pretty much means the same thing. So, now, that is the Testimony of the Mad Arab Part 1 from here. Now, because I had a bunch of different notes and things, I was reading it from here. But, anyways, so any of the sections of this book that you read, do some research, write stuff down, write your questions in the book, write your little annotations and different things, maybe little question marks, stuff you want to go back to in the book. Butcher the heck out of this thing, because that's how you're going to figure it out. You got to treat it like a homework assignment, basically. Because the more that you try to keep everything in here, I don't know about you, but I don't got enough room, right? And I love butchering books and taking notes. Anyways, so let me know if you guys liked me reading the Testimony of the Mad Arab Part 1, because I could periodically go through and read more of this so you can get kind of an idea of the flow, maybe the pronunciation, maybe you like having somebody read this kind of thing to you, and maybe my little hints and whatnot. If you want to go super deep in the book, check out my link tree down below with a Patreon and my Udemy classes, because I have several classes on the Simon Necronomicon, and I also offer a gatewalking mentorship through my Patreon, as well as just working with the Simon Necronomicon in general. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this one. Be sure to suggest any kinds of videos and other things that you might want me to do down in the comments. You can always email me. Check down in the description for all that stuff. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see you next time. Good hunting.